Can you check to see what's up? Huh? Do it on YouTube or Facebook? YouTube. Although it says stream now, so let me change the title. Oh, it's streaming now. No, the title of the video is. Oh, I titled it. Okay, I'll change it. Okay. And I'll also make it lazy. So you can do that right away, right? Then you can do a Facebook post and a Longmont Observer on Facebook. It's all
That's awesome. Picture of the proclamation when we're going to keep us in. Sure. I appreciate it.
So when they're going to do a proclamation, we should put that in. I have that legal ready. I just need a picture and a picture. We got you covered.
Make it of Scott.
Okay. We got you covered.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. How's it going? Are you tired of having the back of your head in this thing?
A little bit.
Sandy didn't like it either.
Actually, I still haven't seen the actual screenshot except for what you showed me there. But I heard it's definitely heavy on the backs of our head.
But it's the only way to really get zoomed in on these guys. So. I could put it like right there between them.
Yeah, you actually could. Doesn't bother me.
Then I can't get these guys when they're talking. This is the only place we try it everywhere. We came in here one day and we tried it everywhere. This is it. Sorry.
Good with me.
I agree. Yeah.
2017 Longmont City Council to order. This is a break study session. Could we please start with a roll call?
Mayor Coon?
Here.
Councilmember Bagley?
Here.
Christensen? Here. Finley? Here. Moore?
Here.
Peck? Here. Santos?
Here.
Mayor you have a quorum.
Okay, let's stand for pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Moore.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. I received a letter from Randy Aarons, the mayor of Broomfield, or an email, and he was requesting that we consider having a unified front along the front range for oil and gas regulations, and they're meeting with COGCC next week, a public meeting, and we would like to see if we're wanting to support that effort. So I'd like to bring that back for council consideration next week as an agenda item. Okay. Does everybody agree?
See what it says.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll move on to public invited to be heard. And first person on the list is Joe Cove. So please come down and state your, excuse me, John Cove.
Yes.
Sorry. State your name and address for the record.
I get that more often than you'd believe, Mayor. John Coe, 1899 Third Avenue. Yes, and I actually had an Aunt Joe that I used to work with at Evans and Sutherland in Salt Lake City, so that was an issue then, but it hasn't been since. Thank you for public invited to be heard, and I wanted to briefly talk about the conference I went to 2 weeks ago in Denver, GIS, or Geographical Information in the Rockies. I talked to you briefly about it before. And basically, I brought you an aeronautical chart. Sandy, anyway, let me tell you about another, before I talk about the aeronautical chart, I want to tell you about another, basically, the Denver area, the drainage basin, the Platte River Basin has been mapped in 3 dimensions, and they were looking for other basins in this area to be mapped to this 3-dimensional. Right now, river basins are mapped to what they call 1-dimensional, meaning right down the river channel. But they've actually taken the Platte River Basin and mapped it to what they call 3 dimensions. So when the floods spread out, they can more precisely know that. And I was in a meeting, and one of many meetings. I had a hard time telling you, and that's why I waited a week to come, because there were so many opportunities at the Geographical Information Conference, and there is every year. So they're actually looking for somebody to map the space. That's not why I'm here today. I actually have met some people at USGS who may be able to help us with our airport noise problem. And I actually have a pilot's license myself, but I wanted to briefly talk about this aeronautical chart. And Sandy has a chart here. So, and you can actually unfold it. But this is basically the terminal air chart for this area. And Longmont is here, Boulder is here, and this is basically represents an upside down wedding cake, as they call it, for approach into Denver. And I-25 is a major part, a corridor for this area. But on this chart is basically designations for the different airports in this area. We are LMO, being Longmont Airport. And we have, of course, the designation for skydiving, and Boulder has a designation for toke lanes, which are incompatible operations for airports. I'm not sure I am on time, but I'm trying to be concise here. Basically, this chart is put out every 6 months, and this is how the federal government relays information to pilots on what to do and what they can do, and what really regulates why our airport is used so much for skydiving. Partially because the amount of space on the other side of I-25 is limited. But my thought is, and actually talking to a contact I have with the USGS who runs the gravitational antennas out on the side of the mountain, and they actually use Longmont as their address, very interestingly. But well, I'll call her Pam, I don't want to give her last name, because her job is to dispense information for the USGS. But anyway, back to the chart, and I see I'm on time here. These charts are put out every 6 months, and if we could start to spread the parachute operations further east, and then start to get either per day for the tow plane, we might be able to fire our skies at least on a part-time basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Marion, Stump?
Good evening. My name is Marion Stump, and I live on Humboldt Circle in Longmont, Colorado. I am an advanced practice nurse. I have lived here since 1984, and I'm here to address your issues around oil and gas regulations. I am very well aware of the Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is an organization nationally which has come out with a statement saying the release into the atmosphere of methane, volatile, organic carcinogens, and air toxins from oil gas operation poses multiple damages to human health. This was a statement made in Washington, D.C. in July 10th of 2017. We have now peer-reviewed scientific studies from highly reputable scientists that document statistical association between living close to gas and oil fracking sites. This is no longer an imaginary thing. There is definitely regulations that need to be addressed as far as fracking is concerned. I would like to just read to you what they state. This organization is done with highly reputable people. Fracking for natural gas extraction creates potentially harmful health effects during the hydraulic fractioning technique itself, and from associated processes including road building, pad clearing, truck trips, drilling, cementing, flowback waters, off-gassing, compressors, and pipelines. Among the most severe sources of concern are toxic drilling fluids and fracturing liquids, air emissions including volatile organic compounds, diesel pollution and noise pollution, stress factors, and methane leaks. This is not something we can ignore as the city of Longmont in Boulder County. I moved to this community in 1984. We raised our children here, and as I said in the beginning, I love this community for its clean air, its open space, and among other things, I plan to take my last breath here. May it be clean. Please choose your people over profit. Thank you.
Michelle Goldstein?
Hello, my name is Sal Goldstein. I live at 649 Wade Road. My house backs up to Golden Pines and the BNSF Railroad spur that goes from Longmont to Lyons. And recently the railroad installed creosote railroad ties. I'm sure I see people nodding because you can smell it all over Longmont. And creosote is a carcinogen. It pollutes the groundwater and the air. And how does the BNSF Railroad get to put a carcinogen through the town of Longmont? I'm upset about it. And I've talked to Jonathan Singer, our state representative, and he was to talk to a representative from BNSF, and I haven't heard a thing back. I have my physician jogs at Golden Ponds, and she can no longer jog there because of the fumes emitted from the creosote railroad ties. We should not allow the railroad to do that, especially there's an alternative. There's CCA, the green wood that you see in landscape timbers. They could have put that down instead of the creosote railroad ties. So that's why I'm up here.
Thank you. Steve Foley?
Actually, it's Steve Hawley, and but thank you anyway. I kind of like to hear that once in a while. I have a question I'd like to pose to the council members, the mayor, and any representatives from the gas and oil company. If fracking, the reason I'm here is to talk about fracking. If fracking were as safe as we're told that it is, my question is, why does the industry, the multinational industry, have to have an exemption to the Clean Air and Water Act, more commonly referred to as the Halliburton exemption?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe you would have an industry that would have to have an exemption if it's really that safe. Given our dwindling water resources, it's hard to imagine that every well we lose 2 million gallons of water right into the ground on the first fracking operation. These wells can be refracked up to 15 times or possibly more, and you can imagine the amount of water that's going into the ground, never to be reused again. Where I live, which is out on County Line Road, we feel the effects of fracking every day in terms of the odors, the noise of the trucks going by, and so it's not a industry that doesn't do harm to the people that are in the area. The multinational corporations that are doing this extraction have only one goal in mind, and that is profit and shareholder, increasing shareholder value. I would really hope that you as our representatives could do something about that, really protect the people that put you in office. And on the same line again, putting those of us that actually put you in office ahead of these multinational corporations that are in it just for profit. And it would be nice if there's anything at all you could do to stop fracking totally in our area. Thank you very much.
Well, the reason why we don't allow extra clapping or cheering or jeering is because then people that have an opposite view will feel intimidated. So I would appreciate it if people would not clap one way or another. And Leland?
Hello, Pam Leland, 620 Grandview Meadow Drive. We, the citizens of Longmont and Boulder County, expect the City Council to protect our health and our safety and put these first and foremost in your considerations for this community. Fracking and all oil and gas extraction threaten both the local health and safety, be a heavy industry in areas not designed for heavy traffic, and too near public and residential areas, exposing our citizens to toxic pollution that impacts the air that we breathe and the land and the natural open spaces that we value, and the water table and the waterways that are critical for drinking and irrigation. We want you to join with other cities and the county to just say no to COGCC and the state and oil and gas. Let them sue us. You have been offered free legal counsel through CELDAP, resources that would help you to stand up and for our community rights. Our health and safety comes before corporate profits. I don't care if we leave money on the table that's unacceptable, if that money is blood money and it hurts our community. Thank you.
Judith Blackburn.
Mayor Coombs and council members, Judith Blackburn, 3724 Oakwood Drive. It seems that just as council elections are ramping up, our fair city is facing some renewed challenges from the oil and gas industry yet again. Many of us here tonight are concerned about news of potential fracking on the eastern and southern sides of Longmont. We're especially concerned about potential drilling under Union Reservoir, a threat that brought us out in full force back in 2012 when we were successful in our citizen initiative to ban fracking within city limits. Water over the dam, so to speak, at this point, except that that threat is back again. This issue, and speaking of water over the dam, the related one of voting on a rate increase to fund more acre-feet of water storage space in the Windy Gap firming project than city staff actually recommended will be front and center in the upcoming council elections. I know that those two issues are not supposed to be related, but wasting water, our most precious resource, connects them. I encourage everyone here tonight or watching the proceedings on TV to attend the upcoming candidate forums and support those candidates who sound the strongest on opposing fracking and limiting the amount of water we store from the western slope while keeping our own backup water supply safe in Union Reservoir. We await the city staff reports, but I want also to say that those of us who organized and attended the May 6th symposium called Get the Frack Facts at Front Range Community College much appreciated city staff's presence there to tell us how the city intends to protect our community against the health and environmental dangers posed by oil and gas incursions into our neighborhoods and waterways. The proof will be in the pudding as the pending permits are processed and we hope rejected. Council, I encourage council to collaborate with Boulder County, as an earlier speaker, or as Jeff Moore suggested, to resist fracking. It takes courage and creativity to stand up to corporate greed and legislative overreach in the matter of state preemption. But let's have at it. Your constituents are watching with bated breath.
Karen Dyke?
Karen Dyke, 708 Hayden Court, council members. When I was here a few weeks ago, I said I no longer knew what to say to this council, and I ended up reading comments from Erie residents on the horrors of fracking that they're experiencing in their community. Tonight I will give you some ideas that you could use to stop this dirty industry from coming into our midst. First, the COGCC is in the middle of a lawsuit by Earth Guardians for failing to carry out the mandate to protect the health of citizens and to provide for safety. The Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the kids, and COGCC is now challenging this in the district court. Just say no to drilling until this is decided. Impose at least a 1,000-foot setback to water. There have been 465 spills up to the end of September. Weld County had 19 spills in the 2-week period reported October 2nd. 6 of those contaminated groundwater. Set a huge fund for the right to drill at the reservoir that would cover the cost of potential contamination. Maybe $20 million or so would cover the cost to reclaim the lake. Don't allow them to put in pipelines. Yes, it means more traffic. It also means we would have to worry about pipeline leaks, and we aren't contributing to their profit margin by allowing this. Set high fines for air pollution with a plan to monitor continuously and to shut down operations if any air toxins are noted. Enact a community bill of rights similar to the one in Lafayette. Quickly annex the property south of the rec center and don't let the wells come in there. 2 schools are proposed there. Fight so that the wells don't come. fight the COGCC if they want the wells drilled anyway. Work with Lafayette, and thank you, Jeff, for basically bringing this forward, that we would work with other communities here to draw a line around our perimeter and around Boulder County. Just say no should be your mantra. Voting to allow drilling next to the reservoir is like playing Russian roulette. Which baby will have their defects or be born prematurely? Who will have a child develop asthma? Which child will suffer with leukemia? Will an adult develop respiratory issues? If we have a blowout like the one in Texas that resulted in a 3-mile evacuation zone, what will happen to those children at Trail Ridge Middle School? The public hasn't seen yet what will be proposed later tonight. When I see that it includes a discussion of pipelines, I know that fracking at Union Reservoir is almost a done deal. So I will close with these words. A vote for any drilling at Union Reservoir is a pro-fracking vote. You will be on record prior to the coming election of how you vote. Vote wisely. Thank you.
Alderman Pearson.
Good evening, I'm Coleman Pearson. I live at the Suites 2000 Sunset Way. I'm scared to death. I've been living there for about 3 years, and there's a culture of bullying, intimidation. It's been fostered by management, I feel. I wouldn't want to give any examples to that. I don't feel real comfortable. I'd like for y'all to get to know me and to offer you a chance. I've offered some friends in other arenas in this town to get to know me as a beautiful town. I've bicycled all my life. I've lived all over the world. What's going on in this country today? People are dying because of our ideology. I don't wish anybody any harm. I've lived outside this country and been adopted by these folks from other places. I've been adopted by people here in Longmont, and it's very unusual. I didn't expect to meet the people I've met here. Councilwoman embraced me the other night. I met the chief of police last night at a very unusual forum, I feel, at least for me being from Alabama. I'd like to be an asset to this community. We have no representation over there. Absolutely none. Me standing up, I take my life into my own hands.
What initiatives, we know about that, for preemption and introduce special legislation to impose burdens on the statewide valve emission process. Okay, I'm going to skip down to where the meat is. The rights in Article 5 belong to the registered electors of these municipalities, not the municipal governments. These fundamental rights cannot be preempted by the state or COGA acting as its proxy.
I'm sorry, James, but you're...
Oh, the 3 minutes are up. Already? Yeah. All right. You guys swore to uphold the Constitution. Do so. Scott Stewart.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Scott Stewart, 229 Grant Street. Airport again. Just got some notes. We're going to add a little bit here. It seems that Quiet Skies has lost their appeal through the court process. Some might see this as a mile high win. I'm not sure how we can think of this as a win. And it's not really a win. It's really the fact that we can't control what happens once these planes leave the air out of our own airport. It's not that what they're doing is right. It's we can't control what they do. It's offensive to me that, I forget it, it's not offensive to me. We had a member of a community here at Boulder County that took it to the extreme. They took this to court. That's pretty extreme because they couldn't get resolution from going to the airport. They couldn't get resolution from council. Everybody said, not our problem, we can't do anything about it, we have no rules, it's FAA. It's FAA because we are taking their money. Stop taking the money, control the airport, do with it the right thing. We're so concerned about the future of this community that we're talking about spending a ton of money on future water projects, yet we've got a noise problem in the city that we don't want to look at. We do things with noise. Training, what are we doing? We're trying to figure out how to get quiet crossings, right? Events have time limits. We can put a time limit on an event and say, stop doing it. Loud cars. We have ordinance against loud cars. You can't have them. Engine brakes for trucks. There's an ordinance against it. But for some reason, the airport's taboo. I mean, is it because, like the gentleman from Elite Aviation says, we've got enough money to, contribute the max amount to who's ever behind the expansion of the runway? Is it because you're in their pockets? Do the right thing for Longmont. Control the growth of this airport. There is so much untapped revenue from the area around the airport, but it's still limited because we want to put a chokehold on, you can't build this high, you can't do that, that's in a flight path, this is a noise thing, sign this paper that says you can't come after us if the noise bothers you. It's offensive. We're not supposed to clap, we're not supposed to cheer for these things that offend us, that might be, I forget what the phrase was, intimidating to others. It's intimidating.
3 minutes are up. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Hey, can I finish?
Okay, now we'll move on to the special reports and presentations. So Wendy Nessinger, the Vice President of Longmont Economic Development Partnership, here to receive a proclamation, and I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. A proclamation designating October 6, 2017 as National Manufacturing Day in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas Longmont area manufacturers represent more than half of all the primary industry businesses in our community, and whereas Longmont area manufacturers employ nearly 4,000 people, and whereas Longmont area manufacturers produce products including automation technology, skincare products, beer, traffic control systems, poultry, pharmaceuticals, food products, printed circuit boards, optical instruments, and many others, and whereas manufacturing is the primary driver of the Colorado economy, according to Colorado Biz Magazine, and whereas the average annual wage for manufacturers in Colorado is 20% higher than the average annual wage for all other industries, and whereas when our existing businesses do well, it benefits the community through job creation, local expenditures, taxes to support community services, and the creation of a culture and character unique to Longmont. Now, therefore, I, Dennis Elkins, Mayor by the virtue of authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim October 6, 2017 as National Manufacturing Day in Longmont, and encourage all our citizens to recognize the importance of manufacturing in the Longmont area. So Wendy, would you like to come down and make some comments?
I'll make some comments and then I have some friends with me.
One more time.
I turned it off, sorry. Mayor, City Council, thank you for the proclamation. Us, the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, Northern Colorado Manufacturing Group, Career Development Center through the San Gabriel Valley School District, and the Front Range Community College, and, the Chamber's Education Committee. We're doing a special event on Friday with the students of the San Gabriel Valley School District, taking them on 2 tours of Custom Microwave Locally and Zone Tool to show them the importance of manufacturing and how cool manufacturing really is. And then we'll wrap up at the Advanced Technology Center at Front Range Community College, where we'll have the mayor come and read the proclamation, Jessica Erickson with the Economic Partnership We'll talk about the importance of manufacturing, and we will have all of the representatives that are with us tonight, as well as other manufacturing representatives there, to network with the students and have lunch and talk about why manufacturing is important and how they can make a living in manufacturing, and it's important in our economy. So if it's okay, I'll have them come out for the photos. Thank you.
Now we have the Boulder County Commissioner, Deb Gardners, and policy analyst, Megan Davis, are going to give a presentation.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us to present to you today. I'm Deb Gardner, one of the Boulder County Commissioners, and with me today is Megan Davis, who's a key member of our policy team. We know the City of Longmont cares deeply, as does the county, about maintaining a strong human services safety net. We greatly appreciate the partnership we have with you on safety net issues and applaud the fact that you and the people of Longmont back up your commitment to those in need with a significant investment of resources. It's good to periodically step back and assess the results of your investments. To that end, we wanted to share with you the sizable benefits that the people of Longmont and Boulder County have received through the Worthy Cause initiative. As you know, Worthy Cause is a 0.05% sales tax, or 5 cents on a $100 purchase, first passed by the voters in 2000, and renewed twice since then to help provide for the capital needs of nonprofit service providers in Boulder County. Tonight, we want to provide a presentation and report on specific impact that the Worthy Cause 3, which was approved in 2008, has had over the last 10 years in helping agencies provide better services in our community, like affordable housing, healthcare clinics, mental health counseling, early childhood learning, child care, and aging and disability services. In short, it's been a real game changer for our nonprofits, partners, and the clients they serve. And with that introduction, let me introduce you to Megan Davis to go over some of the details.
Gardner, good evening. Thank you for having us here, Mayor Coombs and council members. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the Worthy Cause program and then share some of the highlights of sort of the lifespan of Worthy Cause 3 and some of the impacts that it's had on our community tonight. Right there. There you go. Okay, I'll just take this one. So specifically, I'll talk about what Worthy Cause is, the program structure, and some of the Worthy Cause investments across Boulder County and also here in the city of Longmont. I've also provided for each of you this report. This is a report which provides an overview of the life of Worthy Cause 3. There's 1 year left, so I'll talk a little bit about that, but where we've made investments so far, and you'll get some more detailed information that I'm covering tonight. So, as Commissioner Gardner mentioned, Worthy Cause is a 0.05 countywide sales tax. It supports capital projects for nonprofit human services agencies throughout Boulder County. Agencies can provide anything from healthcare, childcare, aging services, disability services, housing, and more. And it's been in place since 2000. And of course, it's titled Worthy Cause 3 because this is the third iteration. In 2000, voters approved what was a conversion of a 0.05 sales tax that had been dedicated for emergency services. And this was specific to nonprofit capital investments. In 2003, voters extended it for 5 years. The first iteration was a little bit shorter. And in 2008, voters again extended Worthy Cause for 10 years. Sometimes it's helpful to see the ballot language. You can see exactly the specific language that is included in the Worthy Cause ballot, and it's for the purposes of funding capital, facilities, and equipment for nonprofit human services agencies and housing authorities within Boulder County, providing health, transitional, and affordable rental housing, and other human services, including but not limited to childcare, early childhood, education, basic needs such as food and clothing, and services for the elderly and people with disabilities. So it's pretty broad. It covers a broad range of services and needs, which has been important over the lifetime of the sales tax because it allows us to really identify the needs within the community and target those key areas where we know that we're seeing issues or that we're seeing kind of an increase in need. In terms of the revenues, Worthy Cause has generated over $20 million since we started collecting the funds in 2019. For 2017, you can see since it's a sales tax, we'll see how exactly everything comes in, but we're projecting about $2.7 million. It's gone up, obviously, over its lifetime and kind of started still in the recession. And so as sales tax generation of revenues has increased, we've seen an increase in the Worthy Cause revenues as well. So the way that Worthy Cause 3 was structured is that for the first 5 years there was pool funding, and there were also designated agencies, we call them. And these were agencies that when we first put together the Worthy Cause program and the ballot language and the resolution, those agencies had projects that they were either planning or that were in the works. And so we specifically dedicated some funding to those designated projects for the first 5 years. Throughout each of those years, we also had pool funding, so funding that was open on an annual basis for us to conduct an RFP process for nonprofits to apply to receive Worthy Cause funding. We have done an annual application process every year throughout the lifespan of Worthy Cause. And again, you've seen kind of what's been available from year to year. Anywhere from $1.7 million to about $2.7 million has been available for nonprofits within the community. So our investments over the life of Worthy Cause, we funded 113 awards to 43 agencies, and the total funds that were awarded during those years were about $19.1 million. We did set aside some funding in 2016 and 2017, $500,000 in each of those years, and that funding has been set aside for permanently supportive housing. Identifying again that is a real critical need in our communities, and that those projects can sometimes be difficult to find funding for. We set aside this funding. We intend to do a separate process in 2018 to award those funding specifically for permanently supportive housing. We also did something similar in 2015 for permanently supportive housing, did sort of a separate cycle of funding with some of the Worthy Cause dollars. So with the match funding, we have an estimated $50 million that have been invested, but that's a very conservative estimate. And we use that estimate based on the fact that no more than 50% of the investment in a project is Worthy Cause dollars. And for most projects, it's far less than that. In particular, some of our larger projects that we invested in our community, places like the Hour Center, Clinica, Salute Clinic, here in Longmont, those are pretty big projects, and so we have a much less kind of total percentage of the cost of the project. We might have $1 million for, say, an $8 or $10 million project. So that's a real conservative estimate in terms of what we've leveraged in the community with the Worthy Cause dollars. And I should just say that one of the things that is so great about Worthy Cause is oftentimes it can be the first money in for an agency when they're starting a capital campaign. And it really shows a community commitment to that project by having some community dollars invested in it, and it gives them a real foundation for their fundraising, and that's really enticing for foundations, grant awards, community donors, etc., because they see that there's already some solid money into the project. So if we look at Worthy Cause in investment areas, or by investment area, there's kind of some 5 key areas where we've invested funds, and it's split somewhat evenly among at least 4 of them. In the blue, you can see children and youth. These are services that could be teen services, early childhood services. Several examples here in Longmont, Wild Plum, the YMCA, child care centers. Some of those are services that fall into that category. Health and well-being, 24% of the funds in health and well-being, and 29% in housing and homelessness, 20% for basic needs and economic well-being, and those are providers such as the Hour Center, and then 5% for community safety. And community safety is really human services focused community safety. That includes domestic violence agencies, also some of the child safety type organizations like Blue Sky Bridge. Those would be included in that category. So it is a little bit smaller, a little bit more kind of a niche category versus the other 4. And I would also mention that, again, the broad ballot language and the flexibility that we have from year to year gives us the ability to see what the needs are over kind of the lifetime of the program. And that has been really important for our community because a lot of the investments that you see in that purple slice of pie, basic needs and economic well-being, after the recession when we had a lot of people in our community who were still really struggling to get back on their feet, we had very, very high need for our basic needs providers, and they were initiating a lot of efforts to expand their programming and also their capital infrastructure to support those needs, many of which have not necessarily gone down but have sort of leveled off. So we made a lot of investments early on in those areas. Same with our federally qualified health clinics, like Salud. We have made some strong investments in those areas kind of early on. And as you know, with the increased challenges that we have around affordable housing and homelessness, in the sort of tail end of Worthy Cause, we've made more investments in that category. So this reflects sort of the lifetime, but on a year-to-year basis, that might look a little bit different. So this is a snapshot of where the investments have been made throughout the county. The funds have really been distributed throughout the county to providers. The category that you see on the far right, Boulder County wide, as you know, there are a number of providers that really do serve the entire county. So while they might be located in Boulder or Louisville or Longmont, they're actually serving the entire county. Some examples might be VIA, Transportation Services, Community Food Share. Those are agencies that really serve countywide, but they're located elsewhere. So this really reflects the agencies that are located in one community and primarily serve that community. And again, for a full list of the agencies and funds for Longmont, you can look in the book. Again, here's another graph or chart that kind of depicts the distribution of funds and also throughout the county, and also you can see which services have been funded in which part of the county as well. And finally, here are some agencies that have been funded here in Longmont for projects. Again, you can look at a full list, but you can see it's a real range of everything from health services, housing services, child care, early childhood services, domestic violence services, basic needs, pretty much the whole range of services. We provide some capital funding through Worthy Cause to support those agencies. So in terms of outcomes, each project tends to have their own outcomes, and when we look on the whole, kind of the key areas where we see improved outcomes for agencies are increased and improved the type of services that are available. So that could mean that an agency wants to provide a new type of service, for example, a new maybe financial education class that they didn't provide before. And now with the help of Worthy Cause and perhaps constructing a classroom, they're able to provide that new type of service. We also see increases in the services that people can provide. They can serve more clients because now they have more dental chairs or more clinical rooms where they can see clients. So we actually see an increase in the number of clients the agencies can serve. Strengthening connections between providers. This is really important because one of the key factors that we look at through the application process for Worthy Cause is how they collaborate with other agencies. So we really want to look, particularly if there are smaller agencies and they may have some synergy with larger agencies. Are there opportunities for them to work together, possibly even co-locate together? Are they connecting when it comes to service delivery so that we know that there's that it's easier for clients and that we're finding efficiencies around the services? So we're really able to use Worthy Cause to help strengthen those connections within our community, not just within Longmont, Boulder, Louisville, but also across the whole county. And then it's just strengthening providers who maybe have been renting a space and they want to have some stronger foundations, some roots in the community. This gives them the opportunity to have a more sustainable model moving forward and know that they're going to be able to stay in place in the community, providing service that is needed over the long run. And then finally, Worthy Cause is set to expire in 2018. This will be, we just closed our application cycle for the 2018 funding. I think we got 22 or 23 agencies apply for funding, and so we'll work through that process, and then we'll be awarding the funding for the last basically pool of funds for the Life of Worthy Cause 3. And then the Boulder County Commissioners have placed an extension on the 2017 ballot for voter consideration. So here's my contact information if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer questions now. I also am providing a link to the report if you want to pull up the PDF for that report.
Does anybody have any questions? Councilor Beck?
I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you. I think this is an incredible partnership with all the municipalities in Boulder County, and I know it's almost impossible to get anything done unless you have a good partner to do it with, especially on capital projects. So thank you very much, and I hope this passes.
Well, thanks, Councilmember Peck. I would just, on the partnership issue, I'm glad you brought that up. It's really important as we're looking at the projects that come forward. We have conversations with each of the municipalities around the projects and how does it reflect kind of what's going on in the community and how does it work along with perhaps any operational dollars that might be awarded, that type of thing. So that is really an important piece of it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
I wanted to thank you too, and for pointing out how much leverage we get out of $20 million, we get $15 million out of this. As Director of Health and Human Services, Karen Roney, and Kathy Bender will tell you, this is really critical to us, and it works all the time, and it builds really strong and cohesive relationships with people. So thank you so much for all you guys do, and I do hope it passes, yes.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for the information. I really appreciate it. These are still grants, correct?
These are not grants, they're investments in the community. We have a contract with the agency, and the contract is for the capital investment and the services that they will be providing that go along with it. And then we have basically a deed of trust and promissory note, so that investment in the property stays with that agency and with the services until the time that they for the lifetime, really, for 99 years.
99 years.
Or
yes.
until they decide to, if they're no longer providing service, if the need is no longer there, or, anything like that.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is that I remember Longmont Housing Authority was looking at potentially the Worthy Cause tax for some of their capital projects, but the 99-year basically lien on the property was too much to overcome with some of their financial institutions. Has the county considered a lesser time period?
So that isn't an issue that we've had with any of the other housing authorities. We're always happy to subordinate the worthy cause to any other, financial interest in the property, and so that we do on a regular basis. Really what we're interested in with worthy cause is the permanent status, and so we also offered, if there's a permanent affordability covenant on the property or another mechanism that secures that, permanency, or, for us, we have 99 years sort of as the proxy for permanency, that we're happy to look at those other mechanisms that can address the permanency piece.
Well, and I understand that you said, 23, 22 for 2018 agencies have applied?
Yeah, yeah.
And I understand, because it's money for them, and most of them, 99 years, it just seems very long. So I bring that up again. It has come up prior in my tenure on council that 99 years is probably a little too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Mayor, Coons, your first item is the second public hearing and final direction on the 2018 proposed budget and the 2019-2022 proposed capital improvement program.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Teresa Malloy, Budget Manager. And this evening is the evening for your second public hearing on our 2018 budget. Before we do that, though, I did want to point out that included in your council communication is a recap by fund of all of the changes that we have brought forth to you since we first presented our proposed budget to you back in August. Not planning on going through those with you this evening. However, if you do have questions or do want me to go through them, please let me know and I'll be happy to do that for you. So, I don't know if you want to have questions before the public hearing or not.
Does anybody have any questions about these changes, or should I just go ahead and open up the public hearing? Councilmember Christensen?
Just one, and this is sort of for the audience and to refresh everybody's memory. A lot of these say that there is a, quote, decrease in unemployment expenses. So could you explain to the audience what that's for?
Absolutely, Councilmember Christensen. So one of the changes that we did discuss with you over the past couple of weeks was the change to decrease our unemployment expense. And the reason that we are proposing to decrease the amount that we budget for unemployment is because that fund is sufficient to pay our existing unemployment expenses. So we are decreasing the transfers essentially from all of our operating budgets to the unemployment fund to match, more equally match exactly what we're paying in unemployment expenses.
All right, I don't see any further questions from council, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. And we've got Gail Allen that signed up. You want to come down and speak?
Gail Allen, 1127 Twin Peaks Circle. I read in the paper that only one person spoke on the budget last week in public hearing. For everyone listening, although the topic of budget is somewhat dry, lacks passion, it is indeed the single most important decision which represents our city's priorities, values, quality of life, and defines the projects we're going to follow next year. In general, I agree with and accept the budget items presented, but we still don't have enough money to accomplish those things that would continue to enhance, maintain the quality of life for our residents. And I see we must increase taxes to cover our needs. Seeing all this, I say to myself, where can we make wiser decisions to scale back expenses? I would not sacrifice health, safety of residents on essential services such as sewer, water, sanitation, telecom. So I'm looking at other enterprise funds. An enterprise fund is defined as self-sufficient. Revenues cover expenses. The Airport Enterprise Fund is not functioning that way. Not even with $282,000 in federal and state grants, it still cannot meet operating expenses, and the city continues to subsidize it with our tax dollars. The Director of Finance spoke, recommending a 50% decrease in the administrative transfer fees that the airport would be paying to the city for services it receives. That means instead of the city getting around $188,000 in such fees for 2018, they would only get half that amount, lose almost $94,000 in money. In addition, the airport is requesting an additional $20,000 that the city would need to pitch in to match FAA grant funds, and also asked another $10,000 for snow removal. That totals almost $124,000 in lost revenue or payout to the airport. We, the taxpayers, are substantially subsidizing the airport. That is not the definition of an enterprise fund.
The money could be better used for greater good in Longmont. Perhaps get moving on the railroad quiet zones. Perhaps more on affordable housing, or continued repair of incomplete projects to restore the St. Vrain. Several weeks ago, one of our councilmen stated that although the airport is an enterprise fund, the city can get around it. It implied that the city gets around enforcing its own rules of what defines an enterprise fund. Well, that is not the way I want Longmont city government to work. I want it to be fair and transparent. I don't want our city to find loopholes that defy the purpose of our expectations and fiscal obligations. If a program cannot be a self-sufficient enterprise fund, it should be recategorized. Thank you.
Thank you. Clark Allen?
Shorter than me. Clark Allen, 1127 Twin Peaks Circle. After hearing at a recent city council, we always find a way to get around enterprise funds. It really disturbed me to think that accepted accounting business practices and principles around enterprise funds are being blurred. Therefore, I think it's important to revisit the definition of an enterprise fund. A fund in which the services provided are financed and operated similar to a private business. An enterprise fund is operated so that the costs, i.e., expenses including depreciation of providing goods or services to the public, are financed or recovered through user fees or charges. In Longmont, the enterprise funds are the airport, golf course, sewer, water, etc. The key here is costs recovered through user fees, just like the increased water fees to cover the cost of the Windy Gap project. So based on the aforementioned comment, I decided to take a look at Longmont's 2016 Comprehensive Annual Finance Report, specifically relating to the airport. And not surprisingly, user fees in 2016 did not even come close to covering airport expenses. The airport, basically, the user fees only covered 68% of said expenses. And if you remove the questionable use of the cell tower revenue, it is only 57%. If it were not for the federal and state grants, this airport would be deep in the red. And as a side note, I agree with the current administration on this one point. I do not think that federal dollars should be used to keep the Longmont Airport afloat, considering the majority of the income from the FAAs is passenger ticketed fees. We need to focus on funding our failing water and sewer infrastructure. It is time for the users at Vance Brand Airport to fully fund this airport through their user fees and stop leaning on Longmont and the federal government. Just like the users of water in Longmont are expected to cover the cost of the Windy Gap project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Come on down.
Ron Gallegos, 424 Kimbark. I actually want to get off in a little different direction. I'm not mystified having been on council that this is not the most exciting item in the public's mind. What I'm suggesting is we need to be a little more transparent with the budget, which I think means that we have to take an additional stab, because right now it's pretty darn dry. So the average member of the public doesn't really understand what's going on and isn't paying attention. My suggestion is that we need to create an additional message. We need to make this less opaque. We need to make it more a clear water approach to the general public, which means we might try and change how we tell the story. Maybe create a video or something And I know Jim has a lot of work and his staff does a good job. But by training, my training is in finance, and I'm a mortgage lender. So when I have difficulty following the budget, imagine how Joe Blow on the street feels. And I think he's entitled to understand what we're spending and why we're spending the money. So I think we need to work on, as a suggestion for the next 1, 2, 5 years, coming up with some other means to really communicate to the public the importance of the budget and what we're doing in the 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. I think with larger projects, the discussion like water, it's easy to quantify because I think we understand the water projects sort of, because we understand water, drinking water, water in our bathtub, water on our grass. But when we start talking about enterprise funds and CIP and how funds are going to be, realized in the next 2 or 4 or 5 years, when you're looking at the numbers and you're saying, well, why is there a carryover of $3 million? Or why is there a carryover of $5 million? The city doesn't look like it's having a problem. I think there's a basic lack of understanding. And I think we owe it to our citizens to be opaque and as clear as we can be. Just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak to this public hearing? Okay, I'll now close the public hearing.
Okay, Mayor and Council, so what we need from you this evening is direction on our 2018 proposed budget, our 2018 to 22 CIP, capital improvement program, the pay plan, and then our financial policies so that we can prepare those ordinances and resolutions to bring them back to you next week.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Eugene, do we need to do these separate, or can we make one fell swoop?
And Council, I think you got a fell swoop.
Then I move that we give final direction on the 2018 budget. Direct staff to prepare the ordinances and resolutions for the 2018 budget to 2018 to 22 capital improvement program, the pay plan, and the financial policies.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded by Councilmember Kinley. Let's vote. And that passes 7-0. Thank you. Okay, we're on to our next study session item.
Mayor Cruz, the second one is the update on oil and gas matters.
Mayor Combs and members of council, I'm Dale Rademacher, I'm the General Manager of Public Works and Natural Resources for the city. And tonight I'm going to give you an update on a variety of oil and gas issues. So here's the sort of the topics for tonight's presentation. First thing I want to update the council and the public on is on the seismic survey work. Next item is to talk a little bit about the master contract and the drill locations that were set forth in the master contract and the operator's agreement. An update on the status of the state and local permitting process. The ongoing discussions that we are having to further limit drilling locations within the city. Pipeline routing and discussions that we're having around that issue. And then finally, an update on the plug and abandonment of some of the existing vertical wells. So the first item I want to talk to the council a little bit about is the seismic survey. And council, you'll remember that you issued a permit for a seismic survey to be conducted earlier this year. And it's generally in the area shown in purple on this map. That was the seismic survey area that I'm the one with the tape on the way. There we go. Okay, Harold is going to drive for me. So that's the boundary of the seismic survey area where the company came out and got information. Essentially, a seismic survey is an effort to understand the geology below the surface. in order to provide additional information prior to any oil and gas development. Generally what the survey showed was that there's quite a bit of information on this slide. And one thing I do want to give thanks to and to acknowledge is that a Longmont resident, David Stemler, did the review of that seismic survey information, which was one of the requirements that City Council put in the permit, was to make the data available to the city so that we can have a hydrogeologist review the data and provide us with information with regards to what the survey showed. And so Mr. Stemler, again, he's a Longmont resident. He is a geologist with decades of experience in the industry. And he essentially came forward and offered his services to us in a very generous way. I found him to be a very accommodating and intelligent individual. So he has looked at the data, he's looked at the information for us, and he's briefed us on the findings of that survey. And essentially on this map, some of the data that came out of that seismic survey are things, issues with regards to the structural integrity of the area that's going to be fracked. And what the survey showed was that it is structurally sound, and that there is a very solid structure between the producing Niobrara and Codell zones and the surface. And I know that's been a concern not only for council but for everyone with regards to is there any potential of a problem occurring at the surface as a result of oil and gas development in that area. The other thing that's shown on this map is that dark line going sort of diagonally across it. That's known as the Longmont Wrench Fault. And it's a fault line that's been documented really over the last several decades. It's well known. There are several major fault lines that lie along the Rocky Mountains. And this particular one has been known. And it's been known by the industry and certainly by geologists for some time. And really what it does is it influences the direction of horizontal drilling in its vicinity. In other words, it's rather difficult to cross that fault line with a horizontal well because of the offset, if you can imagine, that occurs as a result of a fault line. And so that, of course, came up in the survey, and again, it's been known that fault line exists. The other thing that I think is important there is that the orientation of horizontal drilling, in particular north of the fault line, can either be in the east-west direction or the north-south direction. I'm going to show you some information here later that sort of gives some additional insight on that. Other than that, you know, it was not what they would call a incredibly interesting seismic survey. It was more of a what was to be expected type of work. But nonetheless, I think it was a good thing for council to require that information to be made available to staff so that we can report to the public some of that information as well. So this map shows the drilling that really sort of was the drilling program, if you will, 5 to 10 years ago, when most of the wells that were drilled were either vertical wells or directional wells. We sort of call this the measle map because it gives an indication of the number of wells that the COGCC would typically permit on any 40-acre section of ground. And so you can see on there, there's probably hundreds of wells that would otherwise have been permitted. And so the city was aware of this back in 2011 when we started discussions around the master contract and why we believed then, and I think we continue to believe today, it was the interest of our community to try to come up with a different approach and a different vision for oil and gas development, in particular on city properties east of the eastern part of the city up in Will County. The master contract did achieve a number of policy goals, and we'll talk about a few of those. And it is a very complex agreement. And partnered with that agreement is the operator's agreement that gives additional detail with regards to the requirements that operators have in order to be in compliance with the master contract. And I'm not sure who all was on council in 2012 when we were doing that, but there was also, that was also the same era where the city council enacted the new oil and gas regulations. And so the staff worked very hard to make sure that there was harmony between the oil and gas regulations and the master contract. And, you know, I'll give credit to Eugene and his staff. I think they did a very good job for our community. And I believe our regulations are still ones that others are looking at to try to enact and emulate in every area of the state. So what happened as a result of the master contract? So instead of the map that showed all the individual vertical wells, what it accomplished was 11 drill locations with 2 tank battery locations. The drill locations are shown in red on this map, or maybe pink, and the tank battery sites are shown as like a dark black area. So there were 2 tank battery locations north of Highway 119, and again a total of 11 consolidated or otherwise drill locations. And so what this did is we studied very closely the placement of these proposed drill locations in order to ensure that we can meet the setbacks that were called for in our regulations, namely the 750-foot setback from any occupied buildings, appropriate setbacks from areas of outside activity, appropriate setbacks from bodies of water, and so on. And we spent a great deal of time making sure that the sites that we could agree to at that time, again, this is back in 2012, would comply with our code. So if there's any questions, let me go back to this slide. So council, any questions on what we, sort of the place we got to from pre-master contract to the master contract and operating agreement today? So
Any questions?
I'm going to ask Brad Skoll now to give some update on the state and local permitting.
Thanks, Dale. Mayor and Council, Brad Skoll, Special Projects Manager. As Dale indicated, there are a reduced number of sites that came into play as a result of the master contract and their efforts to further reduce that. The Longmont Land Development Code does have a very strong set of oil and gas regulations. And in order to develop an oil and gas site, there is a zoning permit, a special use permit. So Cub Creek is, we think, the operator that intends to develop the minerals, and they have submitted applications for 3 sites, Cooster, Petrock, and Herner. I'm just going to back up a slide. So Cooster is 6 o'clock on the map, then Petrock is 5 o'clock, and Herner is about 3:30, and that is a tank facility location. So those applications are working through the city's review process, and they have to comply with standards associated with setback and operational standards, green completion, how the waste is stored, a lot of standards I think that are very helpful to the community. So Cub Creek has also submitted these same applications to the state. The state has a kind of a 2-step review process called a Form 2 and Form 2A, in which first a general site location is looked at, and then more specifically site locations are reviewed. So the state has given approval to Lower Adrian and Cooster, Petrock, and Herner. So
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor. Just, I know because it's a topic that people are interested in. Could you explain very briefly why we're not hearing the word top operating? Who is Cub Creek, for those who maybe don't know? And then also, are we only dealing with Cub Creek, or are we dealing with, and again I'm asking a rhetorical question because people are here that want to know, I'm sure, are we only dealing with Cub Creek, or are we dealing with top operating? And there was also another drilling operator who was potentially coming in and drilling outside the master contract. So will that be discussed later on, or do we need to clarify that now?
Councilmember Bagley makes a good question, so it's a good pause. So as you'll recall, the master contract and the operating agreement were originally entered into between the city and Top Operating, because Top Operating was the holder of a lot of the leases out in this particular area. The city is also the holder of a lot of mineral rights out of this particular area. And so that was the original agreement. Since then, and beginning sort of the middle of last year, earlier this year, Top entered into an assignment agreement with Cut Creek, and it's Cut Creek Energy. I believe their CEO, Bob Gardner, has been here at council meetings in the past. But Cut Creek is the entity that Top Operating has completed an assignment agreement with. The city has subsequently approved that assignment because it required the city's approval in order for an assignment to occur. And we are going to talk about some of the conditions that were achieved as a result of the assignment. You also mentioned extraction, and so
But that's a name.
exactly. Extraction is a company that is working in the area. In fact, they are the operator of the wells that are immediately to the east of the city in the town of Firestone. They are also an operator that has ran into a bit of issues in the Broomfield area. What we do know is that earlier this year there was competition between Cut Creek and Extraction on who would have the right to drill, in particular within these areas within the master contract. And they have settled that dispute. It was a dispute that was going to the COTCC. The city had aligned ourselves more with Cut Creek because we have found them to be a reputable firm to work with and somebody that we can trust to work with. We did not find that to be the case in the situation with Extraction, and in fact, they really sort of failed to even reach out and try to contact and talk with us about it. And so in that settlement, which we are not a party to, and so we do not have direct insight into what that agreement was, the major outcome of that was that Cut Creek will be the operator of choice on the northern end, in other words, north of Highway 119, with Extraction being the company that would have the drilling rights on the south end, with the caveat being, and this is what we understand today, is that the Extraction wells, they have not made any application at this point at the state, nor have they made any application with the city, and that we understand that their well locations, if they ever come about, would be located outside of the city, south of Road 20.5. And again, that's generally what we know, but we do not have firm evidence of that, either in the form of any sort of application at the state from them. Does that answer?
Oh, it does. Thank you.
Councilor Beck, thank you. Dale, one more thing. Can you remind us how many wells are going to be on each drill location?
Yes, I think that's coming up in another slide. Brad's going to talk with you about that, but that's another question to understand.
Okay, thanks.
So council members, just to wrap up that last thought, if I can remember what it was, there's another application that's been approved at the state, and it's about at 7 o'clock on that map, and that is Lower Adrian, and so that's where the process of applications with the state and the city are. The state and Cut Creek have agreed to a condition, sort of a condition, if you will, is that the state permits will not get so far out ahead of Longmont's process as to let the operator presume that they can start drilling without Longmont's consent. And so that's in place with these wells. And here we go. So this is what horizontal drilling looks like from a reduced number of sites, and you can see the 4 on the bottom that are labeled Adrian, Cooster, and Petrock. And so Adrian's got about 8 wellbores horizontal proposed. Petrock has about 16 proposed, And Kuster's got about 8 proposed, and Olander, a site that's in action at the state, but not inside the city, is proposing about 16. And so that's based on what they can accomplish with horizontal well drilling.
And how many civil rate?
8. So they kind of happen with gangs of 8, and this is a result of the evolving discussions of reducing the well sites down to these locations. This is pretty typical for what is the method of resource development in this area. You know, probably one of the benefits of this is that it really reduces the surface footprint of what would have been multiple well sites in a vertical or a directional drilling circumstance.
Councilmember Damon? Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Where's the Herner site?
Herner site on here is not shown because it's not a drill pad, but the Herner site here is that black dot over at about 330.
What was that one called again? Can you go back?
It's a Herner production facility.
No, but Herner, but what was the matching well near it? The well site?
Oh, that will be fed by the Petrock well site.
Petrock.
And you'll store that product will come up there.
Okay, thank you. And the lower Adrian is also a drill site?
Yes, and that's a tank site also.
Thank you.
So the last slide that I'd like to talk about a little bit is zooming in on the Kuster site. And this is an example of what the Longmont oil and gas regulations require in terms of development of a site. So it does reduce the footprint from multiple well sites, but you end up with multiple wells on each location. And you'll see a horizontal bar that is an indication of where the wells would be located. And then you see other facilities that are shown in dark on here. But the arcs that are shown on this map to the south are indicating where there are setbacks. And the setbacks that are being used in that location or being applied are the setbacks that are required by the state, COGCC, for an urban mitigation area. And that means it has to be 750 feet back away from what would be a large occupied structure. There are also other setbacks that this project is maintaining that's required by the Longmont Code, 300 feet from any wetland or waterway or a designated outside activity area, and those are locations around the north of this well that kind of arc to make this, I guess, make the site formation look the way it does. So it's been very specifically located to make sure that from the standpoint of our development regulations, it has the lightest amount of impact on the resources we're trying to protect.
Councilmember Beck?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. So, on this drawing, where is the swim area at Union Reservoir from this site?
Straight line.
So that's our beach and where we have people swim.
Yeah, that's the swim location.
Okay, thanks.
I think dog swim location is a little bit further east.
Council, I've got a summary at the end of this that we'll come back and talk to, but I do want to just give one thing before I go further into the presentation. So on this particular drawing, you know, it shows the drill locations from Lower Adrian and Kuster and Petrox and Olander. And so part of the ongoing discussions, which we believe to be consistent with the council's broad direction of both limiting the number of sites within the city and achieving the greatest setback that we can. I want you to know those discussions are continuing. We believe that we may achieve an ability to further consolidate these sites and further limit the number of actual pad locations within the city. Unfortunately tonight, I can't tell you that those are all wrapped up with a bow on them, but we do understand the importance of this. We do understand the desire to absolutely limit development as much as we can. And I want you to know that we're trying to do that as well. I think what this is trying to show is sort of what the technology is doing today with regards to the horizontal drawing.
Councilmember Moore? Thank you, Mayor Combs. Go back one slide, please.
This one?
No, the next one. Can you tell us what the topography there is, whether the drainage is away from Union Reservoir or towards Reservoir from the well site?
It's a great question, Councilmember Moore. It actually falls away from the reservoir. So in the event that there would be a spill, first of all, there's several layers of containment that would be within the actual well pad, but it does drain south from there, not towards the reservoir.
And Mr. Skoll also made a comment about they can't drill without Longmont's consent. Could we get clarification on that?
And so what I believe Brad was referring to is that there is a local permitting process. And Cut Creek understands that, and they are very diligently working with our staff to comply with our code and comply with the master contract and the operating agreement. And so even though they have made application to the state, it was with the understanding that drilling would not occur prior to a local permit being issued by the city of Longmont. So the intent is to try to keep these permits in parallel with each other.
So if we don't issue the permit, we won't drill?
Well, if we don't issue the permit, yeah, theoretically, we would not be giving our approval to that. And then I'll look at Eugene to help us on that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on that?
I think now if you can go back to the other slide. I think what we're saying is when you see these at least the 4 sites on this, and when you look at the total of 11, what we're saying is we're working diligently to reduce that.
To go from 11 down.
To go from 11 down. And that's what we're continuing to work on. We were talking about it today, is to continue to reduce that number.
Councilmember Christensen?
Well, as Councilman Moore suggested, if we don't issue a permit, a local permit, what do you imagine would happen?
I'd like to defer to our attorney on that. I would probably step back at that point.
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney. It's really up to the operator at that point to decide what they do. I can't speak for them. Litigation is always a possibility.
Councilmember Beck?
Thank you. Dale, just for clarification, these black lines, are they property lines or are they flow lines?
Those are, Councilmember Beck, what's depicted on here, and again, don't take this to be scientifically perfect. It's really more of a graphical depiction, but it is intended to show the approximate locations of the actual horizontal wells, not the flow lines. The flow lines would be more within the site here, and then I'm going to talk about the potential for pipeline routes into there. So the flow lines are typically lines that go from the wellhead to the separators and the tanks. And those are typically within the confines of the overall pad. From the pad, it goes then through a gathering line or a collection line, and then ultimately to the larger transmission systems.
So what are those black lines?
So these lines that are on here, the north-south lines, those are the actual wells. That's the horizontal alignment of the well being drilled in the formations.
Okay.
So those wells are actually drilled, what, 7,000 feet down or 9,000 feet down?
Correct.
Okay.
Between 7,000 and 8,000 feet. They're looking to produce in both the Niobrara and the Cobell. That's part of the reason why there's that many wells, because they're trying to produce out of multiple zones.
So they're nearly 1.5 miles down underneath.
Correct. And I think I mentioned it with the seismic survey. There's a Permian shale mass or shale between the Niobrara and the surface. And that's what Mr. Samler was able to report to us.
Councilmember Bailey. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Eugene, this is a question for you. So, two questions. One is just a brief reminder of what protection do our oil and gas rigs provide? Meaning, we're looking right now at eastern Longmont, but my question is, in general, looking at Longmont as a whole, what do they do? The next question is, if we don't grant a permit, what will it do to those oil and gas rigs? Meaning, is it a breach of contract?
Mayor and council, I've got a good answer for the first one. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking on the second one. So generally, our oil and gas regulations are in place. We reached agreement with the state and COGA for them to covenant not to sue for our existing regs. That's very important. So if we don't touch the regs, they have covenanted not to sue. Generally, some of the highlights of our regulations are a surface disturbance restriction in residential zones. We do have mandatory groundwater monitoring before the commencement of operations and after operations have commenced to see that before establishes the baseline. Obviously, the after is meant to detect any contamination at an early stage. We do have a two-track approval process. If you meet enhanced standards, you can go through with administrative review. That is voluntary on the part of operators through the top master contract, top operating, and now they're assigned. Cup Creek has agreed to meet all of our voluntary standards. Those include enhanced setbacks, closed loop processes, traffic mitigation, other things like that. And for your second question, if we don't grant the permit, what happens? As I answered Councilmember Christensen, it's really up to the operator at that point, the applicant. There is case law saying that local governments can have a mandatory land use process at the local level, so that they have to apply and get a local permit is pretty well settled. If the government doesn't issue the permit when you meet the criteria, I think that opens us up to challenge for arbitrary and capricious actions. Who knows what other theories they may have.
Councilmember Moore. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Dale, could you expand a little bit more on when you talk about that shale layer of the formations and what that means for that area?
Yes, I can, Councilmember Moore. And so, again, the seismic survey is really sort of it gives you a cross-section picture going down through the different formations. And it's really focusing on the Niobrara and the Cordell because that's the producing zones that they're trying to get the information on. But in doing that, they also give indications with regards to the stability and the soundness of other formations. And in particular, in this particular one, there is a very stable, non-fractured shale, hundreds if not thousands of feet thick, between the Niobrara and the surface. And that was the point I was trying to make, is that we've heard concern with regards to potential, say, contamination or release, if you will, as a result of fracking up to the surface through the wells. And again, what the seismic information from our geologists informed us was that it's a stable formation.
So that would mean that you said it's not fractured. It's not a fractured layer.
Correct.
And it's thousands of feet thick.
Correct.
So it's really protecting the surface.
Correct.
And the bottom of the Union Reservoir.
Correct. And I asked him that question specifically: should we have any concern? And his answer was no.
Thank you.
So the issue of pipelines and topics on the agenda tonight. We're going to start out by again reminding council and the public that the master contract anticipated pipelines. It's actually right in the language that the parties anticipate that pipelines would be constructed to convey the produced natural gas, oil, and the produced water from these sites. And so, argument can be made that through the master contract, we essentially signed on, at least to the concept that we, the city, were interested in the pipelines being used as the conveyance means as opposed to trucking. Certainly natural gas would have to be piped in any event. But the produced water, the oil, for instance, from the synergy side and from the extraction side, which are just to east of us, are currently being trucked out because there is not a pipeline that can serve those areas. And so again, we expressed mutually a desire to look at those and to have those be extended to those consolidated rural locations so that they would be available for that purpose. What we have been working on as staff is looking at the routing of those pipelines, keeping in mind some of the city's property, a lot of which is open space out of the eastern side of Union Reservoir. And so that to that end, we have been talking with Weld County about possibilities of working with them for placements of the pipelines. So this exhibit gives a potential layout. So I'm referring to this as a possible layout. Because once again, I don't have in front of you tonight a finalized agreement with Weld County to do that. What I can tell you is that we've had good discussions with the county commissioners and also with their public works staff. We have presented to them some draft amendments to the existing intergovernmental agreement between the city and Weld County. And that this amendment would specifically provide for and allow for the placement of the oil, natural gas, and produced water pipelines within the county public right-of-way. They have a 60-foot right-of-way on both Weld County Road 5 and Weld County Road 6. And so we're in the discussion phase with that. They have, my guess is they're going to want to have conditions on it. They're going to want to make sure that the roadway is protected. They want to make sure that it's built according to appropriate standards and so on, which I think is certainly within their peer review, because neither Weld County Road 5 nor Weld County Road 26 are annexed into the city at this time. So our city limits border up to the right-of-way of both of those roads, but do not include the road right-of-way. So again, those discussions are underway. If we're successful at writing an agreement, we will bring that to you to inform and to get your direction on whether or not you believe that's an agreement that we're going to move forward with. And if I had my best guess, I think we would have that within the next 30 days or so. Any questions on that?
Councilmember Moore? Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess I would have thought that if we had annexed property up to the fence line, that the actual annexation would go out to the center line of the road.
So Mayor Combs and Councilmember Moore, I think you would be right. Most farms, legal description would go to the section line, and the section line would be in the middle of the road. That's how our family farm is described. Unfortunately, on these farms, I believe they all went through a Weld County, it's called a subdivision exemption process, that redefined those boundaries and exempted out the county right-of-way. And so what we purchased did not include the right-of-way. But good question. Any other questions?
Any other questions for me? Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. What is your best guess as to the timeline as to when these wells could get through all the processes?
Thank you, Councilmember Finley. What I can tell you is we are in the local permitting process that is being handled predominantly in our Planning and Development Services Department. So I can't speak with specificity, but I do believe that could be completed over the next maybe 30 to 60 days. I'm looking at Brad, 60-ish. So sometime yet. There has been a round of referral with comments that have gone back to the operator, and then it's sort of a bit of a back and forth process in order for all the city's concerns and comments to be addressed. But I know it's underway, and again, I think at the outside it's maybe that kind of thing. And the state process is really at this point the holding game until we complete the local process. I believe from the operator's perspective, they would be ready to begin drilling operations. I don't know if it would be in 2017, but certainly in 2018. That's my best guess.
Well, I just want to comment, I think you've done an excellent job, following directions to try to make this as, it's a tough situation, but I think you did the best you could, and you're still working to maybe even improve on from, 4 maybe down to 2 or 3. And, I personally think, although people aren't fond of pipelines, they're a lot better than, running 400 or 500 trucks up and down the roads every month. There's just no absolute, no risk way to extract these minerals. There's always going to be, but I think you've done a lot to mitigate the risk to the Longmont residents. I appreciate everything that you guys have done.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do have one more issue to hit with you, and that's the plugging and abandoning of some of the existing vertical wells, which Council, you're aware of. There's a number of those, predominantly most of them again around in Weld County. There are a couple of them on the Boulder County side, but virtually all of them within the city are out here in the Weld County, and typically again out in either land that's owned by the water utility or land that's owned as open space. And so again, following your direction to try to work with operators to expedite the plugging and abandoning of these old existing vertical wells. What I can tell you tonight is that, as you know, we've succeeded in getting the Ryder well plugged and abandoned last year. We are also underway with some of the additional site investigation work that we talked with you about earlier. And Jason Elkins is here tonight if you have any questions on that, but we're working on that, and we're also going to come back and talk with you further about that on the 17th. The other one that we've also achieved a commitment to abandoned is the Longmont 810 well. You might remember that's one that's out to the east of Sandstone Ranch, and it was one that was, the access was destroyed as a result of the 2013 flood. And it's really one that its proximity to the New River and to the as a result of the flood is one that I think that everybody's interested in it closed and plugged and abandoned. And they have committed to doing that as a result of our consent to the assignment agreement. I mentioned that that was one of the other conditions that we were able to achieve as a result of that discussion. And they are actively underway getting permits from the city to get in and get the well plugged and abandoned yet this year. Also importantly, head up to the stamp. So the stamp well that Harold is circling up there, that's the well that's just on the east side of Union. And you can see the red line that comes out of that well. It comes to the south and then it heads to the west. It's the same gathering line that used to also serve the Ryder well. That gathering line is still live because the stamp well is still operating. And so one of the ones that is keen on our radar is to get the stamp well plugged and abandoned as soon as we can in our continuing discussions, because what that will achieve is not only the plug and abandonment of that well, but also the decommissioning of that gathering line that comes down through the eastern part of the city. And so that's one that's very high on our radar. We're also talking to them about getting some of the additional wells plugged and abandoned that are in closer proximity to where people are. In particular, some of the wells that are near the Sandstone House, or wells that are near the trail going up to Sandstone. Any place that we are bringing people, we are working to get those removed and plugged and abandoned. But it does take continuing discussions to get that achieved. Unless you want us to direct, or just do something else, that's what we're trying to get done. So in summary, we talked a little about our continuing efforts to further limit the number of drill locations. I believe we're going to be successful with that. I mean, I can't stand here tonight. I wish I could stand here tonight and tell you I've got a bow around it all and it's all perfect. What I'm finding out is they're very complicated discussions and issues that we have to be very deliberate about as we make decisions that we know affect the long-term situation of the city. I'm halfway optimistic and halfway pessimistic, but I try to be the optimist to get to the point where we do achieve even further reductions. I know we're going to achieve further reductions. I just don't know how low we're going to be able to go. It's certainly going to be less than 11. It's going to be less than what we have agreed to in the past. And the other is that staff is continuing with the local permitting process. Again, in accordance with our code and in accordance with the master contract and the operating agreement. And the one site that is furthest along, if you will, in the permitting process at this point is the Cooster site. So with that, questions?
Councilmember Peck. Thank you. So Gail, on the plugged and abandoned, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we not say that we were going to check the ones on private property as well within the city?
And excuse me, Mayor Combs and Councilmember Peck, yes. And that is the work that we're underway with that Jason is heading up for us. That is to do additional site investigations around existing plugged and abandoned wells. In other words, those wells that were plugged and abandoned 10, 20, 30 years ago, to make sure that they're still sound, to make sure that there isn't any leaking gas or any excursions coming from those wells. So that's dealing with wells that are already plugged and abandoned. What we're looking at here are active wells and trying to take them from active status to plugged and abandoned status. Okay.
The other question that I have actually is it's a frustration. It's really frustrating to me because we are patting ourselves on the back about how many well locations, drill sites, but we still have 43 wells that are going to go out. Personally, I don't think we should have any because I feel that we're going backwards as a city. This is outdated. There's better ways to get domestic energy, and the cost is going down. And it's an outdated way to power transportation, and that is escalating faster than we can keep up with it. But the one thing that really bothers me is that we have two charges on council. One is to protect the interests of the city, but the other one is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents. So when we are talking about putting fracking through Union Reservoir, even though you say it's a mile down, those lines break. Those flow lines break. There's tons of data that says that we have tons of data that says that's true. They're not inspected by COGCC. They failed us on that many times. And when we say we are moving these away to protect our residents, it really bothers me that this is water that people swim in. And the fact is, we are giving it the potential to have poison in it, to be quite honest. So I really want to see, it's very frustrating to me that we don't have to do this. So I want the city to think about our risk factor going out 10 years. Are we actually going to let kids swim in this water? Are we gonna let, people, so I want you to think about the risk factor to the city and the risk factor to our residents. And I would propose, and I can't make a motion tonight, but I would propose that if we're going to do this, and council, the majority of council agrees, that we close that bathing site, that swimming area. And people are not allowed to be in the water, but we only have surface with posted signs, just like we do on any gas line throughout the city, that there's a gas line here, that let them know that this water's being fracked, there are flow lines, and it's a risk factor. It's a risk factor for the city as well as for the residents.
Take a break. I was going to just respond quickly that I certainly appreciate and understand those concerns, which is why some of the requirements that we have in place, things like the groundwater monitoring, we will be continuously monitoring the groundwater. I believe we're also going to be continuously monitoring the air quality. So it's not just groundwater, it's water, it's air, it's soil. Those are all the things we need to be looking at. And as I mentioned to Councilmember Moore, the Cooster site drains away from the reservoir. So even in the event that there was a leak in a tank, in a flow line, any of the facilities from the wellhead on, it would not drain into the reservoir. It would first of all be contained within the containment around the facilities. But in the very rare event that was breached, it would head south towards the railroad. It would not head to the north. And that was one of the things we looked at and we were concerned about. And the other thing is, I believe we are one of the only cities, certainly one of the few cities, that have designated areas of outside interest in the state of Colorado. That we were proactive and went to the state and got those designations at both Sandstone Community Park as well as at Union Reservoir Swim Beach for that very reason, in order to protect and to keep oil and gas development as far away from that as we can. Again, we're always working within the regulations of the state and the regulations of the city. Those are the tools that your staff have to work with. And so I just offer that, and I think we all share a desire to protect the reservoir. I certainly do. And I believe the plan that we are proposing provides a very high level of protection. And as the mayor said, I doubt there's anything that in our life that has zero risk. But just want to share that.
Councilmember Christensen.
I have two questions. One is that the well that you mentioned wanting to plug, the Stamp one, which has the gathering line all the way through that lovely neighborhood out there. Just kind of close to you. What do we have to, what would it take to close that? How close are we to doing that? And what would be the next process?
Thank you, Councilmember Christian. It's a great question. What we understand is that the Stamp well is the one that's currently holding the lease, and that's important in the industry. The discussions we've had is that they would move to plug and abandon it once the Cooster wells or the lower Atrium wells are completed, which could be as early next year or sometime next year. And I think it's in all of our interests to get that done as soon as we can. But again, they have to work within the law of the state as well as the industry.
Yes, that would be a real priority.
I think so, yeah.
The other question I have is, and I think that Councilwoman Peck asked this a while ago, but because there are a lot of people here, I'd like to reiterate, or I'd like to have this made public again. How much does the city get off its mineral rights here, and where does that go? And thirdly, why are we not using that money to buy back mineral rights to various other properties that are a priority?
So Mayor Combs and Councilmember Christensen, I would have to speculate on what the revenues would be coming into the city after the production begins on the proposed wells. What I can tell you is that the revenues that come to the city on the existing old vertical wells, first of all, it varies greatly in any given year, and it is generally declining. But we are using those revenues now to do things like install the monitoring wells around them, to do the work with Terracon, to study and evaluate the plugged and abandoned wells, to fund some of Jason's salary so that he has the time to work on these things. So I think, I want to assure you, we are using those funds back into the work that needs to be done for us to have a responsible oil and gas activity, whether it be existing plugged and abandoned or existing vertical wells in the city. So that's what we're using the funds for. I believe Councilmember Peck has brought up in the past, if we get additional revenues in the future, which is sort of speculative, I don't know. Those funds right now are set up to accrue to the funds that own the property. And so a lion's share of it would go to the open space and to the water funds. Again, I don't know the amounts. I can speculate. I don't know that that's very helpful. But that was the idea. Some of it would also come to the sanitation fund, and some of it would also come to the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Moore? Thank you, Mr. Dale. We're looking at the plug and abandoned wells within the city. How many wells do we think that there are?
That are currently plugged and abandoned? 17 is what I've been told.
17, okay. And do we also know if any flow lines or any gathering lines that are out there that we need to look at?
Part of the work of what we're doing is to not just look at the wellhead, but also look to see if there's any evidence or information with regards to remnants of flow lines or gathering lines anywhere in the vicinity of those plugged and abandoned wells. We're looking at both.
So the question, revenues, in 2016 there was 109,227. 2017 year to date 77,333. Sorry, my eyes can't read. In 2015 231,000. So what you can see is that that's on a fairly steep decline, which what I've learned going through this process is these wells, as they go out further in time, they produce less, generate less revenue, and that is the money that council will remember when we came back and talked about the funding of the testing on the plugged and abandoned wells. Part of that is coming out of this. Part of it is, for example, one of them the golf fund's paying for. Because it's on the golf course, and that's part of the development of that. Council also looked at council contingency funds and authorized that to pay for some of it. So it is a combination of multiple funding sources to look at those plugged and abandoned wells.
Councilmember Penn?
This will be my last question here. About plugged and abandoned wells. I asked, I think it was in June, for us to look at the setbacks for plugged and abandoned wells on undeveloped property, because right now it's 100 feet, which is not acceptable at all. So when are we going to bring that back?
That's on the 17th.
That one's on the 17th
Yes.
as well. Thank you.
And that'll be that, where we are in the studies. That'll be a pretty comprehensive presentation.
So council, with that, again, we will return to you when we reach any sort of settlement or agreement that we can bring forward for your consideration and action. And again, we're doing that with all due sense of urgency to move that forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time for mayor and council comments. All right, we'll move on to city manager. Any comments?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney, any comments?
No comments, Mayor.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.